So we're back with yet another Stairway to Heaven solo video. I thought I was ready to move on from the solo, but I have a few more ideas I want to wrap up before touching on other subjects. 3 videos to be exact, starting with this one. I'm of the belief that bold claims require the highest level of scrutiny, and claiming that I've produced the most accurate Stairway tab and recorded the most accurate cover of the guitar solo is absolutely a bold claim, so the burden of proof is on my shoulders. What I have here is 2 versions of Stairway to Heaven solo, cut up in Reaper. On the top track is the original by Jimmy Page. This version is from the remastered Mothership album. On the bottom, I have my recording for the 50th Anniversary Instrumental Reproduction. I've adjusted levels to match the perceived volume and done nothing else, so there's no EQ or whatsoever, so we can not only judge my guitar playing, but also my production skills and how closely I was able to match the original. What we're going to do here is we're just going to play measure by measure and compare the way Page plays his solo to how I recorded it, just to see how close of a job that I did. At the end, I'm going to judge my own performance, and trust me, I am going to be harsh about it. Hopefully we can find some interesting things to talk about regarding the nuances of guitar playing. To assist me, I have my trusty tab here. It's a lot easier for me to pull this up instead of switching the video to me on my guitar if I want to demonstrate an individual note. It's just a cleaner way to look at things. Basically, I'm going to pull this up whenever I want to highlight an individual note because it's really hard to tell anything looking from the waveforms, especially since this is not the isolated solo. These waveforms will include the drums and the rhythm guitars as well. Anyway, let's get started. We're going to begin not with the solo, but the last measure of the bridge going into the solo. As always, we're going to start with the original version of the song, and since these are long sections, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play them through all the way, and then I'll also opt to go and break them up furthermore so that we can really get in our head a good comparison. So here is the original bridge ending leading into the solo from Stairway to Heaven. So now my version. Right off the bat, I can hear 2 things. There's a slight difference in tempo. This section is played entirely free form, and it's actually well known that Led Zeppelin sped up their tempo continuously as they played the song. It was basically done free form without a metronome and so on. I generated my song based on my tablature, which is limited to 2 things. One, I could put a bunch of tempo increases through this section. The other thing is I'm limited to whole number tempos. I can't do fractional tempos, so it's hard to match exactly what's going on, and my section is a little bit slower, but the more striking difference is in the production. Right off the bat, you can hear a difference in production. What isn't going to come through is the loudness because I've adjusted for it down here, but looking at the waveforms, you can see that the Mothership Remaster is much louder than my recording, and I've reduced the volume level by 5 dBs just to match the same perceived loudness. At the end of this riff, you're going to hear some crackling. Right there and somewhere right there as well. Unfortunately, this remaster does suffer from brick walling thanks to the loudness war in the digital age. I'm personally vehemently against that, so I mix and master my songs cold. I believe that if you want it loud, you can turn it up yourself. Aside from that, you will hear differences in frequency spectrum as well. My version of the song has much higher low end, which gives it a boomier but also muddier mix. This is a personal preference of mine. It's how I like to produce my own music, especially on the kick drum. Although I did aim to get something close to the original when it came to the acoustic guitars and the 12-string. On the other hand, the Mothership Remaster has much more high end, so it's crisper but also harsher. That combined with the brick walling can actually make it painful in the ears to listen for too long, which I found out when I was doing my tab and listening to the song over and over again in 1-second increments to get every single note. There's a lot of fatigue because of the way that this is produced, even though it does for the most part sound great. The last thing I wanted to achieve with my mix was to increase the level of the kick drum and also the bass. Bottom's snare comes across really strong in this original mix, but the kick drum is kind of buried and actually quite difficult to hear at parts. When I was making my tab, I could not hear a lot of these double hits on the ands of 1 and 3. I'm talking about this note here in particular, this note and this note. They didn't really come through in the mix just because of how the low end is kind of suppressed. Since Bonham is my favorite member of Led Zeppelin, and I firmly believe he's the greatest drummer of all time, I wanted to make sure his contributions were heard. Another problem with the original Stairway mix is that John Paul Jones is turned way down and the bass is practically inaudible. It's even hard to tell it's there sometimes. Some people think he only plays keys because that's how he performs the song live, but the second half of the song does have bass, and there are some quite incredible fills that are completely lost. He was really Jason Newsted at Metallica 18 years before And Justice for All. So what I did when I mixed this was I turned up both the kicks and the bass, which actually limits the ceiling on how much I can push everything else. This is going to come into play down the road, and that's why I'm taking the time to explain all of this right now. But for the moment, let's get back to this part. One of the reasons I wanted to start here at the bridge is highlight some of the differences in how I see people tab and play this section. So in the second half, there is a melody in this lick, which is often not played or even tabbed at all. It goes like this. To clarify, let me pull up my tab and show you. It's going to start right here. I'm going to play this one measure before. And let's hear that again on the original. On the rare occasion that people do play this, some people incorporate it into the lead guitar as part of the solo. If that was true, it would be played on the center channel with the lead guitar. But when you listen to this, it's actually panned out to the side, meaning it is indeed part of the rhythm guitar and should be incorporated into the 12-string riff, which is what I've done here. So let's hear this whole thing again, just so that we can move on to the next section. So let's get it on with the solo. Here's Jimmy Page's iconic opening lick. There's so much clipping it hurts my soul. But let's ignore it for now. One more time and then we'll get to my version. So as far as the notes, it's pretty clear I'm playing the same thing. Everybody knows how to play this lick. One striking difference is that Jimmy Page's vibrato on the first and last notes are really hard. You can really hear that string shaking as he's playing this note. On my version, you can't hear it as well. But that doesn't mean it's not there. If you saw my last video, you'll hear me emphasize how important this vibrato is in achieving the Jimmy Page sound, and on the video recording of my solo, you can see me doing it. I did err on the side of under vibratoing. I probably should have dug in a little bit deeper, but the real reason the vibrato isn't as strong is on the production side. Because I turn up the kick drum and I turn up the bass, I lose room to push on lead guitar. And what I actually opted to do was reduce the level of the lead guitar to pull the solo into the song so it melds with the rest of the tracks. This is a natural consequence of wanting to keep the low end high. If I push the solo to sit on top of everything else, then the rest of the mix has to suffer, and that's why you hear things get buried on the original version. What happens in my version by keeping the guitars low is that the softer components like vibrato and sustains at the end of notes won't be as prominent because the background noise is large enough to drown it out. So it's kind of the inverse problem. So this isn't something that I would take points off because I know in the actual recording there's video evidence I'm doing the vibrato. It's really more of a matter of production, not performance. So as far as me playing the solo, I think I'm doing a pretty good job, but we are just getting started, so there's no reason for me to be too confident right now. So let's get to the next lick. So there's not a lot to talk about here. I've already spoken in great detail how a lot of people play and tab this part wrong. So that's going to be this section, especially with these bends and the slides, and they also mess up, you know, the F at the end. So really all this does is provide evidence that the way that I play it is correct because the two sections do match perfectly. whole thing. Alright, so the next lick is one of my favorites to talk about because of those subtle bends on the index finger. I'm going to play it first to see if you can hear it, and then I'm going to go into my tab and show you just exactly what I'm talking about. Did you catch that? So the bends I'm talking about are right here on these two notes, C and E, but he also does them on the first run up here. It's just not as prominent. Let me play the section for you. Let me play the section for you with the solo on. So the bends, I'm gonna try and highlight the sections for you. I think they show up like right here, and I actually had them previously highlighted like right here, but let's just try and get those down. So what I can hear, I hope you can hear it, but what I can hear is that in this section, you get much more prominent bends, but those same bends do kind of appear up here. The way I've notated them in my tab was to do quarter bends, which I actually think is too much. I would consider them to be 1/8 bends, but as you can see here, Guitar Pro only lets you go as low as 1/4. That means up here, these bends are closer to like 1/16 because they're even more subtle than what's going on up here. So what I did was I ultimately chose not to incorporate them into the tab here, even though I know that they actually exist. So I'm going to play this one more time. Again, if you're not hearing the bends, I want you to really listen as closely as possible because they are definitely there. Then let's hear my version and see how well I incorporated them. Again, because of the way that I've leveled this and chosen to produce this, some subtle effects do disappear. The bends I hear, they are prominent in this section and not so prominent in the beginning. So on my version, there's actually a pretty funny story. This take was roughly number 50 on my attempts at doing the solo in one day. My hands were tired. I was actually done for the day and I was going to resume the next day, but I felt like doing one more run just for fun. And this one I wasn't going to take seriously, and I was just going to play super loose, and it ended up feeling different in my hand as soon as I played the end of this first lick. Something about the way the strings felt and the fretboard and the guitar, how everything seemed to just move in slow motion compared to all the other versions where I was rushing to do the solo to keep up. I knew that this was going to be the take. So when I got to this lick, I was kind of preoccupied and caught up in the excitement that I actually forgot to do the bends up here. When I got to the second run, I realized what I had done, so I compensate, and in the video you can actually see me pull the fretboard real hard to make sure that these bends are in. Unintentionally, that makes my version of the recording sound exactly like my tab. No bends up here because I forgot, and then overcompensated bends right here. So that's why it sounds the way it does. And you compare it to the original. So aside from these really minor bends, there's really nothing else to talk about in this lick. I think I've played everything pretty accurately. So let's move on. So this next section is pretty good. I do want to emphasize the shift slide in the middle, so let me break this up into halves. So this shift slide here, it's pretty often missed. And let's listen to the second half. So it's pretty good. I actually do think that this bend here at the end is kind of flat. So Page really hits the top of that full bend, and I think I kind of get like 1.75 there. So it's not the cleanest. If we combine all the things that I've missed so far, like the really tiny details, the vibrato not being strong enough, missing those slight bends on my pentatonic runs, along with this slightly flat bend, I would say they probably amount to a full point of deductions. I'll say right now I'm about 99% accurate. I think you'll be hard-pressed to find another solo this close at this point, especially since people tend to mess up, you know, this section a lot, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only person who cares about playing these bends. So I will deduct a point. I think it's a little bit harsh, but I'm going to overcompensate and err on the side of, you know, not thinking I'm too amazing, because I know for a fact that there are flaws in my version of the solo compared to both my tab and also the original, and we are going to get into that as we go deeper into the song for sure. So let's just play this riff through again, and I'm going to let it run into the next section, which of course is the iconic repetitive run. So something interesting, I want you to listen closely to this part as I play it again. So when I was doing this video, I noticed that Page actually misses quite a lot of these A's right here. I think he misses about 4 of them. One right here, one about right here, and then like 2 more back here. So let's listen to that again. So like definitely here, 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 and here. He actually misses that note. Let's see how well I did. So I made sure that I was playing this precise. In fact, I threw away a lot of solo takes because I was missing that note. I thought I wasn't playing clean enough, even though the rest of the takes were done perfectly. So I think that's kind of funny, because it turns out it's probably more accurate to mess it up than to play it totally clean. So let me listen again. I think I missed like 1 right there and maybe 1 right there. So production makes it hard to hear. I would need to look at the video or the isolated version just to be sure. But yeah, I did spend a lot of time working to make sure that I was hitting these notes every single time. And it turns out Jimmy was actually missing it himself at a couple moments. But, you know, not something that I would deduct points for, you know, not playing clean enough. You know, I'm not going to purposefully miss notes for the sake of making it sound like the version that was played when we know for a fact what notes are intended to be there. Before we move on, let's just check that bend at the end. I want you to listen closely to that. So what I hear on the original version is no vibrato whatsoever. Let's look at my tab. No vibrato. None whatsoever. Now let's listen to my version. Again, it's hard to hear because of the production, but I will tell you for a fact that there is a vibrato on my version of the solo, which is a problem. In my previous video where I tell you how to recreate the solo, I actually emphasized how important the vibrato was here. I believe I compared it to a horse neighing. So that just goes to show, even though I've done such a deep dive into studying the song, I'm still making errors. This is the kind of stuff that's really difficult to do. So I don't fault anyone for having mistakes in their tabs or their lessons. It takes an enormous amount of time to learn every single note of a song, and my tab is accurate. You know, I spent the time to make sure that this tab was accurate. And even then, I have the resource right in front of me and I'm still making mistakes. When I hit record, my muscle memory still takes over, and then it goes to show how strong your memory of something, an idea of a piece of music in your head can overtake the reality of the situation. Because even as I was making that video last month on how to recreate the solo, I had forgotten or not realized that there's no vibrato in my tab, that there's no vibrato in the solo. But because I put a vibrato in my version of the recording, I thought it was there. This is something that is definitely worth a full point deduction. Doing a vibrato when there's none, it seems harsh, but I'm also punishing my error because this is something that I adamantly insisted was correct in my last video, so it's misinformation. It needs to be debased. So that puts me at a 98 right now. Let's hear this one more time and move on. Funny, I guess this is a place where I'm lucky and that the way I've done the mix has masked my vibratos, but I'm not going to cheat. I do admit 100% that there is a mistake in my version of the solo right there. So let's get to the next section. I just love how loud Bonham's toms are. He goes hard on that fill. As far as the guitars go, I think everything is spot on. I don't hear any discrepancies whatsoever between the two sections. So, you know what? I do want to talk about this backing lead here. I've never discussed this in any other videos, but what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to play on a distorted tone using a slide, like in country music, slide guitar. It produces a nice, continuous, ethereal sound. I'm going to show you that in here. So yeah, this is going to be that lick, right? And then with the solo, let's just get that. So I gave a little bit of a preview of the next lick. As always, let's just play this whole thing again so that we have it in our heads and move on to that next lick. Okay, this next one is another one of my favorites to break down. So one thing that happens is a lot of people play this riff in the wrong position. I'm going to show you closely that Jimmy Page plays the first 4 notes together. So he holds 3 strings at the same time. So let's get to my version of the solo and let me pull that. So you can see how these notes are all tied together so you get a continuous sustain. So let's listen to the 5th note. So that's the bend. If it's hard for you to tell what's going on, let me explain to you what's going on and pull up my favorite, MS Paint, to show you. So these are the notes that he's playing. The first is the 3rd string. He's going to bend up and hold that all the way through. Then he picks this note, the 2nd string. Then he picks the 1st string, and he's holding the 2nd and 3rd string at the same time. After that, he goes and he picks the 2nd string again. So these are the first 4 notes. Note 1, note 2, note 3, and note 4, all sustained together, if this makes sense. For note 5, the bend, he holds the pre-bend, and then he picks and releases the note down. This is what it looks like in my version. It's almost exactly the same. Pull it up, hold the notes, pick them, and then I released the string and I did a bend release. So another discrepancy. Once again, let's pull up the tab and see what I did. Bend up, hold, 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 3 notes, same so far, and look at this. Up and then down. It looks like a bend release, right? But it's actually a pre-bend release. So the tab is correct. I'm holding the bend, picking it, and then dropping the note down. When I just look at the tab, it looks like a bend up and a drop down. This is just how Guitar Pro chooses to display their pre-bend releases. Thankfully, my tab is still solid. Odds are in my performance, I just skimmed over this tab lazily without listening close to what happens. Ultimately, what that means is this is another point deduction off my solo because this is played incorrectly. So as always, we're gonna listen again and then let's get to the next lick. So this one's pretty spot on. As I play it again, I want you to listen and notice that Page's first bend doesn't actually get all the way to the note that he means to play. What I mean is that comparing the first note to the second note, where he's trying to do a 1.5 step bend, the first note's a little bit flat. So let's listen to me. So like the previous section where I talked about Jimmy Page missing those 14s, back up here, like we know what note he intends to play, we know what note he intends to bend up to, and on his performance he just didn't quite get there. So that's not something again that I would deduct any points for. Trying to imitate all the subtleties of the notes that he's nailing is hard enough. Trying to imitate the subtleties of the notes that he doesn't quite play cleanly is virtually impossible. All right, we're almost there to the end, so let's get to this final lick, or second to last lick actually. One more time. So there's a major difference in that opening bend. I've described this as a very, very slow bend, which is when you factor the time it takes from the genesis of the bend to hitting the very top of the note. But Page does something unusual here. Let's jump back into Paint and let's get rid of this. So normally when you do a bend, it's gonna look like this. You start slow and then you ramp it up to the top. So this is a very, very slow bend. This is how it's typically gonna be played. Page does something that's actually very unique. He ramps it up fast and then asymptotically hits the top. So he slows it down and just at the very end, he gets to the top of the note. I want you to listen to the difference in momentum. So his momentum starts at the beginning and my momentum comes in near the end. And then compare it to this. In the speed of the song, it's probably not something super noticeable, but when I break it down like this, it's an obvious difference to me. So this is a point deduction, putting me now at a score of 96. So let's finish this video off. Last lick, easiest one in the song. No major issues here, no point deductions. So that leaves me with a final grade of a 96. In school terms, that's just on the cusp of an A+. Solid grade, but not perfect by any means. I'm not actually devastated. I never thought that my solo was 100% perfect. I do believe that it is the most accurate out of all solos, and I would wager it is a very tough challenge to find another cover that's closer than mine. It's far more important to me personally that my tab is correct, because that's where I'm claiming to have created something that is 100% note for note perfect. The solo is just my best attempt at doing it, and there's other reasons for me accepting this solo as the one I put on my instrumental reproduction compared to other takes. There were takes where I played certain parts better, but I made minor mistakes on other issues. If I really wanted to, I could have Frankensteined multiple composite takes together to do like the one ultimate perfect Stairway to Heaven solo cover, but because I wanted to do it as a video, well, it was just really important for me that the version of the solo that made my version of the song was done in one single take, and this was the best take and it felt the best. So there was something intrinsic about it that made this the one that I put on the solo. Again, it's far more important to me that my tab is correct, because I am claiming to have created a 100% note for note perfect tab. Tabs can be thought of as a record of music, documentation of what was performed by the original artist. When it comes to the performance, that's a different story. Covers are meant to pay tribute. People can and should put their own flair or spin on it. For me, accuracy was important in my cover because my goal was to do a faithful recreation of the song. I'm presenting my work as something that's supposed to be 100% accurate, so I need to try and satisfy that claim. The ultimate conclusion in this video is that I was close, but still not quite there. The purpose of this exercise was to show just how difficult it is to copy something note for note. I've been playing guitar for 15 years and I studied every single note of the solo for months, and even then I made mistakes in places where my tab was 100% accurate. So I have all the correct source material, and it's still tough to execute perfectly on the spot in a single take, which I think is very understandable. Nonetheless, I think the result's pretty solid. So this video is going to serve as proof that for the most part, I am playing the vast majority of the notes in Stairway to Heaven solo correctly in comparison to the original studio performance. And in those places where I messed up, I know what I did wrong. So with that, in the next video, what I want to do is I want to go online, pull up some Stairway tabs, and review the most popular ones that are out there and give those a grade. And we'll see just how good the stuff online is compared to mine.